there are so many opportunities elsewhere in the world. You can make things happen so fast outside of the United States. If you have an idea, if you have a vision and a little bit of capital, or in some cases none, you can make things happen elsewhere.
Yeah, there's the last place I'd really go to start a entrepreneur enterprise would be the U.S. To me, the U.S. has the worst of both worlds. It has a lot of very business-minded people and fairly entrepreneurial-minded still, to some extent, people who really focus all day and all night about making money, which is fine and good in many respects, but they kind of should balance that off a little bit with actually living a decent life. But at the same time, they have so much regulation now. To open a lemonade stand, John Stossel did the math. It was something like $40,000 it would cost to open a child's lemonade stand. It'd take about 6 weeks to go through all the permits, your health permits, you need insurance. And there's actually a group in the U.S. called, I think, Free Lemonade or something, because there's been so many lemonade stands shut down by SWAT teams, literally cops showing up in riot gear, shutting down lemonade stands. So it's become that bad in the U.S. now. And it's so funny hearing from people from the U.S. and not to mock them, but it is just funny for me to hear how they'll say things like, "What if I went to Nicaragua and I wanted to start a lemonade stand? Would that be possible?" It's like, of course, like no problem. You just need some lemons and some cups. There you go, done. And same thing for anything, a bar or a restaurant, almost anywhere in the world. Now, you have to know the local culture. You have to get the biggest thing, and this is something that you have to do everywhere, is just make friends locally and figure out what's going on and ask some people. You know, you can't go anywhere and not make friends and do well. You have to integrate somewhat into the local community, and that doesn't necessarily mean you have to learn really well the local language, because most places, and this is another advantage that Americans have, is most places, most people speak some English, and definitely there's always somebody who speaks some English. You look at Chinese people, for example. I've traveled the world. I've been to about 100 countries. And I can't remember a place where there hasn't been some Chinese restaurant in the middle of nowhere. I've been in the middle of like almost the forest, you know, in a place like Mexico. I was in a place called Turtle Bay, which is on the Baja Peninsula. I was on my sailboat. I had to stop in because there was a bit of a tropical storm happening. And we walk into the town. There's this tiny little town, and maybe 300 people in this town. And the only restaurant in the town was a Chinese restaurant, which is actually run out of a house. It was actually in their kitchen, which had like a window which you could walk up to and order some Chinese food. And the people there didn't speak Spanish and they didn't speak English. They just spoke Chinese, but they were just running a little Chinese restaurant out of their house in Mexico. So you look at people like that, and there's a Chinese restaurant in almost every city, every country on earth, and a lot of time they don't speak the local language or anything. They're just making Chinese food and taking local currency for it, and that's it. So Americans have a huge advantage in that respect. You have to learn the local sort of customs. For example, I heard one story. So you're always going to hear some bad stories, of course. But whenever I hear the bad stories, I always ask a few questions, and I find out very quickly why it didn't work out. So, for example, I heard one story of a guy who went to like Cancun, which, you know, is a very touristy area, which isn't very Mexico-like in any respect. The police are very American style. The currency is the U.S. dollar for the most part. It's very Americanized. And a guy went there and he tried to start up a little, he was renting out some sort of like surfboards, something along those lines. But there was a lot of other Mexicans on the beach who were also doing that. And so he was competing with them, and they were all on the beach, and one of the Mexicans called the cops and said, "Hey, that guy isn't allowed to do that." And so he actually was told he couldn't do that anymore. So then I saw online, "Oh, Mexico isn't as free as I thought it was." It's like, well, try that anywhere except for Cancun and Cabo. And and don't go somewhere where there's other Mexicans on the beach with the same business and compete with them. If you don't know anyone in the area, of course they're not going to like it as much, and they might cause problems for you. So find something that they're not offering, and do it in an area where it's going to be less sort of Americanized, where there is more of a free market. For example, here in Acapulco, you could pretty much do anything you want. Just start up any business. You just rent. If you want to start, I'll give you an example of a great place right now to start a business is Cambodia. Cambodia is, for younger people looking for an opportunity, is one of the best places on earth by far right now. because they went through, long little history lesson here, they went through a bit of communism, or tried communism. Pol Pot took over, killed almost everybody in the country, and that was about 20 years ago. And then they went through a period of turmoil for about 10 years. And then about 10 years ago, it all just stopped. And everyone said, that's enough. No more government, no more anything. Let's just try to live and survive and make money. And so it's a very free market. There's hardly any government involvement at all. It's very rare to even see police or anything. And you can literally, in Cambodia, and this was about 5 years ago, it's changed a bit now. It's growing tremendously. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, you could rent a place, probably for about $30 a month, a little place, you know, small, 1,000 square foot sort of little place, in a fairly main area. Just buy a few beers and a bottle of tequila and a bottle of absinthe or whatever you want to buy. Get a few of the local pretty girls to work there for about $3 to $5 a day plus tips, and start up a bar. And you could actually make, you know, $20, $30 a day, which is more than enough back then to live. Rent an apartment's probably about $100 a month back then. Now today, I would probably triple those numbers or quadruple them, and that's what I said actually when I wrote about it back then. I said, this isn't going to last forever. So now I actually heard that to start a decent bar, it's probably going to cost you $1,000 or $2,000 now, startup cost, but everything else is the same. There is no regulation or anything. You just find a place, you just start it up. And of course, there's many more things you can do than bars, but bars are really easy, sort of a starting thing. You could do a little hostel. I've seen so many there. There's no regulations, no anything. You just do it. And very low startup costs. You're not going to make millions and millions of dollars, obviously, but you grow from there, and the place is growing tremendously. So those people who 6, 7 years ago started up a bar for a few $100s, many of the bars there now, I know the biggest bars in Phnom Penh, they literally make tens of thousands of dollars a week easily in profit now. So it's grown into a good business for them. And so those are the opportunities. Other regions that I recommend would be Nicaragua. I think is a good opportunity. It's still very, this is talking about cheap areas to start up where there's very little regulation. Nicaragua, Cambodia, Myanmar, you could take a shot. I'm not sure where it's at. I haven't been there in about 5 years. I hear it's getting better. Anywhere in Africa, but Africa is a real, I don't know enough about Africa to talk about it, but I know that it's very cheap, but it's also, you know, you have to be careful in certain areas and things like that. But it's not as dangerous as everyone says. There's many, many very nice areas in Africa. So yeah, there's tons of opportunities out there. Other places in South America, Paraguay for sure. I would look at Paraguay. I wouldn't look, Bolivia's, I don't like too much. The government's a little bit too involved in things there. They still have too much government involvement. Places like that. But the main thing is just to take a look around and see which place works best for you and for what kind of business you want to start. But there's nothing but opportunity out there.
Well, yeah, I mean, I realized, like, I know some people in Cozumel, and that's in Mexico for people who don't know. I realized, like, for the last 6 or 7 months, 100% of my income has been online. So I can be wherever I have the internet. And I'm kind of, especially as it's October here and it's getting a little chilly, I'm like, well, what am I doing here? You know, if these opportunities might exist. But I think for a lot of people who are U.S. citizens, Jeff, there's also this apprehension about what the whole going away party is like with the U.S. government, you know, as far as expatriation is concerned. And, you know, are you, to get into specifics a little bit, should people be looking at like work visas? You have this, I think what you described as a permanent traveler status, right? Right.
Yeah, I live what's called a permanent tourist or permanent traveler or prior taxpayer lifestyle. It's a bit complicated, and I talk a lot about it at the Dollar Vigilante. It's more for people who have a bit of assets and cash. If you're younger and you don't, I wouldn't even worry about those things. And definitely don't worry about work visas. What you want to do is go to a place and start up your own business, or even work at a place. People, they don't have these big government regulatory agencies in most of these countries, not at all actually. So for example, if you went to Paraguay and you just went to some bed and breakfast run by some American, and you just said, hey, I'm a young guy, I don't have many skills, I'll work here, I'll work my butt off. I'll do anything you need. I'll clean dishes, I'll mop floors, I'll work the front desk. I'll do it pretty much just for lodging and for food for the first month or two, just to learn skills and show you that I have value. And you can do that no problem. There's no way the Paraguayan immigration police are going to show up and ask about your work visa. They don't have things like that in most of these countries. So for younger people, don't even worry about it. Don't worry about the exit party. Just leave. Especially if you have a ton of student loan debt. We just wrote about this in our newsletter at the Dollar Vigilante about how to get out of your student loan debt because so many young people have it. I hear that a lot from people. They'll say, well, I'm 22 years old, I've got a useless Bachelor of Arts degree that is completely useless, and I have like $80,000 in student loan debt, so I can't just leave and go somewhere because, I have this student loan debt. It's like, no, just leave and don't pay it. Because what are they going to do? If you end up in Mexico or anywhere and you're building a business or whatever, what are they going to do? They can't do anything. And the U.S. government's going to collapse in the next few years, no more than 5 or 10 years, and so that's all going to go away anyway, or the dollar will hyperinflate and then you won't owe anything. Either way, it's going away. And don't get me wrong here about reneging on loans. If you did a private loan with a private person, you have to pay that back one way or another. You cannot just run away from it. That is not the way to live. You will never have a good life by ripping people off or not doing what you say you're going to do. But when it comes to government loans, student loans, for useless things that turned out to be just a complete useless waste of time, that money was created immorally or unethically by just printing up the money. The government used it to create a student loan bubble, which wrapped a lot of people up into it. So people thought they needed a college education, so they went for it, and then they found out it was a total waste of time, and now they have all this debt. That's actually a trap that the U.S. government is trying to do, is try to get people into student loan debt, because it's the only debt, actually, that in the U.S. you can't absolve through bankruptcy. Right. And so they're trying to enslave young people by doing this. So I have no problem with people who don't pay back their student loan debt in the U.S. because I see the entire thing as a scam and a scheme. But otherwise, when it comes to loans, definitely, yeah, if you borrow from somebody, you have to pay that back, and no matter how long it takes you, you have to. That is just the only way to live, is to always keep your commitments, unless it's completely impossible, and in that case, you're going to have to just work out some way to resolve it with that person and with yourself, because that's no way to live a life by stealing. It wouldn't be stealing, but it'd be by not living up to your commitments. That's the number one thing, actually, for entrepreneurs and business people that you really have to do. There's really two things that I like to say about. You brought up at the start all the sort of skills or talents or ways people should be to be a good business person or entrepreneur. There's really only two that you really need. One is show up on time. It's amazing how many people don't do that. To whatever commitment you have. And number two, just do what you say you were going to do. Always live up to your commitments. If you do those two things and you're in business, you're pretty much always going to do well, or at least as good as possible. And you're always, with business, there's always failure, and that's fine. But if you do those two things, you'll do very well in the business world. Absolutely.
And I do want to go back to what you were saying about student loan debt. It seems like if that was an actual conspiracy to enslave people, and I've heard people like people who don't think too much like you, like Noam Chomsky, say very, very similar things. I think there was a pre-existing model for that. I mean, I had conversations for years with people who would say, "Yeah, Brett, the things you're saying, that's important, but what do you want us to do? I have a mortgage." Like, people very quickly and kind of unconsciously become enslaved to their comforts. And, they just are stuck in this position working to survive, gathering all the things that they have and keeping all these things that they've acquired through debt mostly close to them. And student loans, probably the most pernicious, because you're going into huge amounts of debt for really nothing. Things that you can totally, as far as knowledge is concerned, you can totally obtain all of that for free today. All you're really paying for is the piece of paper.
Right. And that piece of paper doesn't really matter outside of the U.S. for the most part. Depends which field you're in. If you want to be a doctor, that's a little different. But for most things, even a doctor, actually, you could, in many countries, you need to have a doctor diploma to be a doctor. You just start up an office, and if you're good, people will come to you, and if you're bad, you're going to be out of business. And then inside the U.S., because the economy is imploding, and it's going to get much, much worse through all the regulation, all the taxes, and definitely through the money printing, the inflation. We're seeing all the symptoms of a collapse coming. That piece of paper is pretty much useless. For the most part, there's a few that are okay, like I said, but for the most part, any of those bachelor of anything, forget about it. Women's studies. It's amazing what some people will. I saw one of those memes on the internet. This woman, you could tell she was one of those very feminist sort of women with the short red haircut and the glasses, and she said, "I have $300,000 worth of student loan debt to get my diploma in women's studies, and now I can't get a job. Now I'm going to occupy Wall Street." It's like, well, there is definitely problems, but I think some of those people didn't really think through exactly what they were doing either.
Right, yeah. I mean, my advice, and this advice was formed as the result of me choking on a pretty bitter pill for about a decade regarding college. Understand, like, if you're going to get a degree, if you have no other choice, this is what you want to do, you have to understand what the trends are going to be in that industry over the next 5 to 10 to 15 years. My example was I was a freshman in college in 1995. I graduated in 2000. My degree was in essentially mass communications and journalism. The entire industry was revolutionized while I was in school studying how things were done in the 70s and the 80s. Right. And I had basically a useless degree. I mean, I still wound up applying it, or applying that interest anyway to a lot of the work that I did over the course of the next decade. And it's funny that that's kind of like what I'm doing today, is pretty much, a lot of the skills and, activities are what I went to school for, what I wanted to learn. Of course, I had to teach myself how to do all of this stuff. And I've had a few mentors and a little bit of guidance along the way, but so that's the advice that I give to kids regarding college. But I think your advice is great. Parents will go for that. Like, hey, save yourself $100,000, invest in me a couple $1,000s to travel and see the world and see where opportunities exist, and maybe take advantage of some of them. I think that's fantastic.
Well, one of the things that people might want to do, there is things out there that I think are very valuable. For example, if you're younger, or even if you're in your 30s or 40s, or 50s or whatever age, but if you're sort of this mindset that you don't really know much and you want to learn about it, there's things like Exobase or Exosphere, which is like an entrepreneurship school, which is, I think, 2 months long, which you will learn way more in that than you would in business college for 4 years. And actually, we're going to have a 2-day what's called Exobase here at Anarchapulco this February 27th to March 1st. Just check out Anarchapulco. We haven't announced it yet. We're going to be announcing in the next few days something called Exobase. It's a 2-day boot camp for entrepreneurs. You'll probably learn more in those 2 days than you would in a year in college about business. And the rest you can learn on the internet. So, this entire model of going for 4 more years after 12 years of indoctrination camps, so 16 years, and you still don't really know anything, is insane.
Right, absolutely. A couple more questions before I just want to finish up today with a speed round from listener submitted questions. But one thing that I really wanted to make sure we touched on, you and I have met, we've spent some time together. You seem like a pretty relaxed and stress-free guy to me, even though I know you're managing a lot of things. And productivity without stress is a theme that we've tried to hit on pretty continuously over the course of the last year. What would you have to say about work habits?
Work habits. Well, for me, every day of my life, pretty much since I was born, or at least since I've been an adult, which I say was around 14, 15, I've pretty much worked every day of my life. When I say I don't like school, it doesn't mean I don't like learning. I literally, when I'm not working, I'm reading. To me, my whole life, I've just tried to improve myself always. Every day, I'm just trying to improve myself. Now, of course, you're going to go through weeks where you don't, but you try to. Every day, just learn something new. It really adds up. Work habits, I pretty much, And this has actually been a little bit of a detriment now that I have a family, and I'm trying to balance it a little bit more now. I've actually decided to take Sundays off for the first time in my life. And actually, it's added a lot to my life, and I found that it actually has helped in some ways, because working constantly, you can kind of get really too focused, and you can't see the big picture enough, and you need to step away every now and then and go to the beach or go with your family or go golf or something like that, get your head outside of it, and then you come back and you're just full of ideas again. So, but in general, yeah, no, I don't understand the people who, oh, I'm going to just work 8 hours a day and eventually I'm going to retire and sit on the beach, and at night I'm just going to watch TV. It's like, that seems like just a total waste of time to me. The life is so interesting and there's so many things to explore and to do that I'm just constantly working or learning.
Yeah. Another thing too that we've talked about before is deferring happiness, right? Which you just described. People who say, well, I'm going to go through this grind now, so someday, you know, in their short term, like, oh, well, it'll be Friday soon, or I have a vacation soon, or then the ultimate deferment of happiness, I retire someday, and then I can go to the beach. But finding the work that you enjoy, obviously, kind of makes it not so much work.
Yeah, that's the important thing. Find something you enjoy, and that's totally possible. I know a lot of people think that sounds crazy, like that everyone on earth can do something they enjoy. Believe it or not, some people do like just cleaning houses. I've got a maid here at my house. She just likes it. There's just something it's almost perfect. Like almost everybody has something they like that needs to be done. So just find something that you like. And if you're passionate about something, you can't help but do well at it. And talking about deferring gratification, I remember when I was 18, actually, or 20, I actually decided in my own head that I was going to defer my entire 20s. I wasn't going to do what most people do in their 20s. I was going to hunker down and learn and work for my entire 20s, and my goal was to be a millionaire by the time I was 30. When I turned 30, on that day, I was worth about $120 million. And then I lost most of it. That was the tech bubble and all that sort of stuff, which I learned tremendously from. Yeah, that's what it's all about, is deferring. And it's all up to everybody what they want to do. That was my own personal choice. I decided. And then throughout my 30s and a little bit of my 40s, I kind of lived like a 20-year-old, which is kind of the funny part. I'd go out and party a lot and do all that sort of thing. So I deferred it. And it actually worked out great for me because I actually didn't really develop physically or mentally until I was in my 30s anyway. So, everyone's just got to decide their own thing, but it's nothing but possibilities out there if you think outside the box a little bit. And don't do it the regular, there's that old saying, if you're doing what most people agree with, or if you're in the majority, you might want to rethink what you're doing. I think that was Mark Twain, and I butchered the quote completely, but the thing today in the U.S. is you go to school for like 20 years, you get out, you're in a ton of debt, and then you just go 9 to 5, work at some crappy job, and try to work your way up until you're 65, and then you can go sit on the beach. And what happens with a lot of those people is, by the time they turn 65, first of all, their pensions won't be there, but second of all, if they do retire, you hear about so many people going to the beach and just having a heart attack like a week later. It's just this idea of wanting to have like sitting on the beach when you're 65 is ridiculous. For me personally, I would never want to retire. I always want to do something. The whole idea of retirement sounds like death to me. Why would I just want to sit in a place and play cards all day, and not even, poker, which would be cool because you're trying to make money and learn skills, but, play bridge or something, or play mahjong and watch like soap operas? Like that seems like the worst nightmare ever to me.
Right. So finally, this is actually something I was thinking about myself recently, and I think it's an interesting question. Might be kind of a difficult one, but what would you most like to hear someone overhear someone saying about you? Like if someone said, "That's Jeff Berwick, he blank."
Well, it's funny because I do hear that a lot. I've been sort of semi-famous in a few different areas, and I've actually been in an elevator in Vancouver when I was the top tech guy in Canada, and behind me were two guys, and one guy said, "Did you hear what Jeff Berwick did yesterday?" And I'm just like listening, and they didn't know what I looked like. And the other guy goes, "No," and he goes, "He was at a bar, he drove up in his Viper, and he was with like 10 girls, and he drove off all drunk." And the guy said, "Oh, what a jerk." And I was just listening to them like, whoa. So, you know what? I don't care what people say about me. I really just don't care. For the most part, those kind of people, those people in that elevator, I don't care what their opinion is of me because they don't matter to me. They don't have their own lives. All they're doing is talking about other people. The only thing I really care is what people who I'm involved with think of me, and that would be my clients, my family, my friends. Anyone else, I couldn't care less what they think about me. It does not matter, and that's actually a really good way to live life, because if you really worry about what some idiot down the block thinks about you that you have no involvement in, and he doesn't even know you, you're wasting your time.
Yeah, I formulated the question because I recently I was going through some PorcFest pictures, and it triggered this memory of being at PorcFest, and it was after the show was pretty big and well known. And there were people, I kind of like caught out of the corner of my eye, somebody like pointing at me and talking about me. And I was like, what the fuck are they saying? I want to know what they're saying. So like, I started thinking, what would, with what I've done,
he's probably saying school sucks. No, Brett sucks.
But what would I like to hear people over saying about he is this or he did this or, I thought it was an interesting question to think about, but I totally agree with your answer. If you can't get obsessive about what people might be saying.
Well, what would you like to hear? I'm curious because I can't think of anything I'd like to hear someone say.
I couldn't come up with an answer, so I started I was like, who are they? How well do I know them? I think I touched on a lot of the things that you said. Are they a couple of assholes? Are they the two people I'm closest to? Is it my girlfriend and my best friend? There's other follow-up questions to that. So I don't know. I mean, but because you try to put together a biography for somebody, like when I'm going to do an interview. So you're the host, and we'll do your plugs now too. You're the host of Anarchast, which is a YouTube channel and a podcast, where you do discussions pretty similar to this, right? Where you interview people, ask them why they're an anarchist, and then you guys have a conversation in their area of expertise. You are the editor and the creator of the Dollar Vigilante, and you're spearheading this Anarcho-Poco, right?
Yep. It's an anarchist conference on the beach, and you've been on Anarchast twice, I believe.
Yep.
And I do many things. But the one other thing I'd like to say about people talking about you is it's so funny we live in a world where people take criticism badly. So if you know somebody, like a friend, and he goes, by the way, your breath kind of stinks. A lot of people will go, oh, I hate you. Like, why did you? No, take that as like that. That's what I want people to tell me is the truth. So if there's something I'm doing that offends them or something wrong, like your breath stinks, it's like, thank you. Now I'm going to go find out how to fix my breath. You just saved me from everyone thinking my breath stinks because it does. And so people take criticism the wrong way if it's from people that are actually giving you constructive criticism. Now, if someone comes up and they go, I just think you're a dick, it's like, well, that's not really something I can work on. But I would actually ask them, why do you think that? Is there something I can improve? I'm always just trying to improve, and I never take criticism as being a negative thing. Absolutely.
So I'm looking at the questions that listeners submitted. It looks like a lot of people didn't take it very seriously, Jeff. Is the national government of Ebola in danger of collapse? Can I get Ebola from listening to School Sucks podcast? The only questions, a listener named Daryl Becker, who's actually been on my show a bunch of times, he has a question about HIV and AIDS. He said he'd heard you talk about that before, but I don't see anything here that we can deal with, in just a few minutes, unless you'd want to tackle that. I could read you the question.
Just briefly to answer that, I'm very skeptical of the official story on HIV/AIDS. It makes no sense whatsoever that it started in San Francisco with gay people, and then a bunch of gay people died, and then it was a heterosexual, sexually transmitted disease, which not many people seem to have gotten. Magic Johnson got it, but he's the healthiest looking person on earth. And now it just seems to be in Africa, and a lot of people are dying from it, and now they're vaccinating everyone in Africa. I think there's a lot more to the story than what we were told, especially since Oprah Winfrey in 1987 said that within 3 years, something like 30% of the people on Earth will die from HIV/AIDS. So yeah, it's a lot of these things. You just have to question everything, and I question that one as well.
And you've done your own research. I think that was the thrust of Daryl's question. Yeah, I remember like. Gosh, it was like around the time when I was becoming sexually active, like the early 90s, and Magic Johnson, then Eazy-E, right? And that was kind of the message in school, is like, you're all going to get AIDS. You know, like that's how we believed. Like that was like something I was afraid of going to college, you know, and then, it didn't turn out that way. And it's interesting. I don't know. I haven't done any research myself. The only other question that I think you might like to comment on is, the Dark Wallet project, Cody Wilson's Dark Wallet project.
Well, I'm huge into anything that's Bitcoin related, and I love what Cody Wilson's doing. He's trying to make it more anonymous, and the thing I really like about how Cody's doing it is he's not mincing words. He's not talking nicely about what he's doing. He's saying straight up, this is going to help people launder money, which is great, because laundering money is not a crime. The crime is taxes, and so I just love I love everything that Cody's doing. He just did a 3D printed gun that just sold out. Actually, there's another thing, guys. Like, he just sold out 1,000 of them at, or 300 of them at $1,000 a piece. So he just brought in $300,000, and he hasn't even made one yet. There's so many opportunities out there. So yeah, I love everything he's doing.
And is there, last one, I'm sorry, I'm just going through the list. Are any concern about the recent dips in Bitcoin?
No, not at all. I see it as a huge buying opportunity. It's still double the price it was a year ago. I think it's not a problem whatsoever. I've been looking at buying more. I was trying to buy some of that big $300 block that was for sale, $7 million of it a few days ago, but I didn't have my money in my account at the time to buy it. But no concerns whatsoever. Bitcoin is moving on. It doesn't matter what anyone tries to do. They can't stop it, and that's why I love it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jeff. I appreciate you coming on the show. I look forward to seeing you again sometime in the future, maybe in Mexico.
Yeah, I hope so too. Thanks, Brett.
All right.
Skip, up the road, up the school you go. Don't be a bad boy, Johnny.